The grand halls of the Celestial Concord Summit shimmered with the glow of alien technology. Delegates from across the galaxy had gathered in this magnificent place to discuss trade, diplomacy, and the future of interstellar relations. Some were here to negotiate peace. Others sought power. But one thing was clear. Humans were still the newcomers. Captain Elias Vance, a Terran diplomat and explorer, stood at the center of a growing crowd. He was tall for a human, with sharp eyes and a confident stance, but in a room filled with towering aliens, he still seemed small. Not that it mattered. He had learned long ago that size was never the real advantage. Persistence was. His current opponent, Valith Shira, was nothing short of royalty, a high-ranking noble of the Silari Dominion. She was tall and elegant, with shimmering violet skin and piercing silver eyes. The Silari were one of the most respected species in the galaxy, powerful, intelligent, and proud. Valith smirked, arms crossed as she addressed the gathering. It is amusing how humans believe they belong at this summit. Your species is young, your technology primitive, and your endurance disappointing. The crowd murmured in agreement. The Silari were known for their superior mental and physical abilities. They could outthink, outblast, and outperform almost any species. Elias, however, was completely unfazed. He had heard all this before. Humanity had entered the galactic stage only a few decades ago, and in that time, they had already surprised the universe more than once. Valith's smirk widened. No human could ever satisfy a Silari, mentally, physically, or otherwise. Your kind lacks the strength, the patience, and the skill. That was it. That was the challenge. Elias raised an eyebrow. He had dealt with Silari before, and he knew their pride was both their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. He let the silence stretch, letting the tension rise before speaking. Oh, care to test that theory? The room went silent. Some aliens gasped. Others chuckled. No one had expected a human to accept such an impossible challenge. Valith tilted her head, genuinely intrigued. You wish to challenge me? Elias nodded. That's what I said. Her silver eyes studied him carefully. No human had ever attempted the Silari endurance trials. It was a contest that had crushed stronger, more advanced species, a test of mind, body, and persistence. She should have dismissed him, but something about his confidence unsettled her. After a moment, she finally spoke. Very well, human. I accept. The trials are set. Word spread fast. Within minutes, the challenge was officially recorded in the summit's history. Spectators gathered from all corners of the hall, eager to watch what they assumed would be a quick and humiliating defeat for the human. The rules were simple. A battle of wits, a mental duel where opponents had to outlast each other's psychic influence while debating complex topics. A contest of skill, an obstacle course designed to test agility, precision, and problem-solving. A test of endurance, where competitors would push their bodies and minds to the absolute limit. The Silari had never lost this challenge. Never. But Elias wasn't like the others. As the preparations began, a fellow human ambassador, Dr. Lena Carter, approached Elias with a concerned look. You realize no one expects you to win, right? Elias grinned. Of course. That's what makes it fun. Lena sighed. You do realize who you're up against. The Silari have trained for this since childhood. Elias shrugged. Yeah. Well, humans have a different kind of training. She frowned. Which is? His grin widened. Surviving impossible situations just to prove someone wrong. Lena groaned, shaking her head. You are going to embarrass yourself. But Elias only laughed. He knew something no one else in that room understood yet. Humans never give up, and that was why he had already won. The grand arena inside the Celestial Concord Summit was now packed with spectators. Aliens from every corner of the galaxy gathered to witness something they never expected. A human challenging a Silari noble. The Xilari were a species known for their unmatched endurance, superior intellect, and extreme discipline. Humans, to most alien civilizations, they were still an unknown factor, weak, unpredictable, and reckless. Captain Elias Vance stood in the center of the arena, stretching his arms casually, as if he was preparing for a morning jog instead of an impossible test. Across from him, Valith Shira, that Xilari noble, stood tall and composed. Her violet skin shimmered under the arena lights, her silver eyes cold and calculating. The official judge, a towering reptilian being from the Orcan Empire, raised his hand. The first trial begins. The mind duel. A hush fell over the crowd. The mind duel begins. The mind duel was a game of mental endurance. Xilari warriors used a special form of telepathic pressure, testing their opponent's focus and intelligence. The challenge was simple. Competitors would engage in a debate while attempting to invade each other's thoughts. The first to break under the pressure loses. No one had ever defeated Xilari in this contest. Valith smirked, her voice smooth as silk. "Are you sure you are ready, human?" Elias grinned. "Are you?" The moment the duel began, Elias felt it, a powerful force pressing against his mind. It was like 1,000 whispers flooding his thoughts, trying to confuse him, slow him down, make him doubt himself. Valith spoke first. "Your species is weak. Your technology is outdated. Humans are reckless, emotional, and foolish. The galactic community only tolerates you out of curiosity." The Xilari audience nodded in agreement. This was how it always started, breaking the opponent's confidence. But Elias? He just chuckled. "That's cute. You ever hear about the time humans survived on a barren rock called Earth, where everything tried to kill them? Freezing cold, burning heat, wild predators, earthquakes, storms. Survival was a daily game for us." Valith narrowed her eyes, increasing the pressure. The whispers in Elias's mind grew louder, sharper. "Yet still, you are weak," she countered. "A single Xilari warship could defeat your entire fleet." Elias shrugged. "Maybe. But humans don't win by strength alone. We win by being creative." He pushed back, not with telepathic power, but with something that Xilari didn't expect: humor. "By the way," Elias added, grinning, "this whole mind duel thing. Kind of rude. I mean, most people at least buy me dinner before they start messing with my brain." A few aliens in the crowd laughed, a rare thing during a mind duel. Valith scowled. "Focus," she ordered. "I am focused," Elias said. "I'm just making this more entertaining." He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Hey, since you're in my head right now, what number am I thinking of?" Valith frowned. She couldn't tell. Humans, for some reason, had an odd way of thinking. Their thoughts jumped around, unpredictable and chaotic. She tried harder, pushing more psychic energy toward Elias. He responded by thinking about the most ridiculous things possible. Bad jokes, old songs, and random images of dancing llamas. Valith's face twitched. This had never happened before. A Xilari mind duel was supposed to be a serious test of intellect and control. But this human was treating it like a game. Elias kept talking, pretending to be casual. "You know, back on Earth, we have a saying. If you can't beat them, confuse them." Valith's focus slipped for just a moment. The judge suddenly raised his hand. "Enough. The duel has lasted longer than any recorded battle between a human and a Xilari. We will now proceed to the second trial." A murmur ran through the crowd. Elias hadn't lost. Valith took a deep breath, frustration flickering in her silver eyes. "You are different." Elias winked. "Thanks. I try." The Skill Gauntlet. The second trial was the Skill Gauntlet, an advanced obstacle course designed to test agility, intelligence, and adaptability. The course had moving platforms, laser traps, gravity shifts, and 100 different ways to fail. Xilari warriors trained for decades to master these trials. Humans, they weren't even supposed to survive it. As the trial began, Valeth moved with grace and precision, calculating every step perfectly. Elias, he ran forward, slipped, grabbed onto a random pipe, and somehow swung across the first obstacle completely by accident. The crowd gasped. Valeth turned, stunned. Did you mean to do that? Elias, hanging upside down from a rope, grinned. Absolutely. And just like that, the impossible challenge had become a spectacle. The Celestial Concord Summit's grand arena buzzed with excitement. No one had expected the human to last this long. The mind duel was supposed to be a quick and humiliating defeat, yet Elias Vance had stood his ground. Now came the second trial, the skill gauntlet. This test wasn't about brute strength. It was about precision, agility, and problem-solving. The course stretched over a vast metallic landscape, filled with shifting platforms, deadly laser traps, gravity wells, and unpredictable obstacles. It was designed to push even the strongest Silari to their limits. Elias stood at the starting platform, rolling his shoulders. His opponent, Valeth Shira, stood beside him, her posture graceful and controlled. Unlike Elias, she had trained for years in such trials. To her, this was simply another exercise in perfection. She glanced at him. You can still walk away, human. Elias grinned, but then I'd miss all the fun. The judge raised his hand. Begin. The first challenge. The shifting path. The moment the signal was given, Valeth launched forward. Her movements were flawless, her steps landing precisely on each floating platform. The shifting metallic tiles moved in unpredictable patterns, designed to throw off those with slow reflexes. Elias, on the other hand, he ran forward, slipped immediately, and barely caught onto a ledge. The crowd laughed. Valeth smirked, already halfway through the course. Having trouble, Captain. Elias swung himself up, dusted off his uniform, and grinned. Not at all. Just making it interesting. He took a deep breath, watching the pattern of the moving platforms. While Valeth relied on her instincts and precision, Elias did something different. He adapted. Instead of trying to be graceful, he timed his jumps differently, jumping too soon, too late, or in ways that seemed unnatural. The platforms, designed to react to predictable movement, couldn't adjust fast enough. The crowd gasped as Elias suddenly caught up to Valeth. She frowned. That's not possible. He gave her a wink. You keep thinking like a warrior. I'm thinking like a survivor. The second challenge. The laser grid. Ahead of them, a spinning tunnel lined with deadly laser beams blocked their path. Valeth paused for only a second before dashing through, twisting and flipping between the lasers with perfect timing. She moved with the precision of a dancer, her body narrowly avoiding each energy beam. The crowd cheered. Then they turned to Elias, expecting disaster. He simply stared at the tunnel. Valeth, now on the other side, crossed her arms. Well? Elias sighed. I could try your fancy flips, or I could do this. And with that, he tore off his jacket, bundled it up, and threw it into the tunnel. The moment the fabric hit a laser, the entire grid of Elias dusted off his sleeves. I let the lasers show me the way. Why work harder when you can work smarter? For the first time, Valeth felt something unexpected. Doubt. The final challenge. The gravity well. The last part of the course was the most brutal. A zero-gravity zone filled with rotating debris, magnetic fields, and unstable gravity pockets. The goal was simple: reach the finish line without getting crushed. Valeth, now slightly annoyed, took off immediately. She maneuvered through the floating obstacles like a master, using her natural grace and Xilari reflexes. Elias, however, simply drifted. Valeth narrowed her eyes. You're not even trying. Elias smirked. Nope. Just waiting. She didn't understand until she saw a large spinning platform suddenly stop. Elias had been watching the patterns again. Instead of fighting the course, He let it move him in the right direction. He made small adjustments, shifting his weight, floating effortlessly through the obstacles without wasting energy. By the time Valeth realized what he was doing, it was too late. Elias reached the final platform just seconds before her. The crowd roared. Valeth landed beside him, breathing hard. "You're impossible." Elias grinned. "Nah, just human." Aftermath. The judge raised his hand. Winner, Elias Vance. The arena fell silent. For the first time in history, a human had defeated a Xelari in the skill gauntlet. Valeth stared at him, trying to process what had happened. No human should have been able to do that. Yet here he was, standing there with that annoying, confident grin. Finally, she exhaled, shaking her head. "You are different from the others." Elias chuckled. "You have no idea." The final trial awaited, the true test of endurance. Valeth had never lost. But now, for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure. The Celestial Concord Summit had never seen anything like this before. A human had won 2 trials against a Xelari noble, a feat no one believed possible. The crowd was no longer laughing at Elias Vance. Now, they were watching with fascination. Valeth Shira, the proud and disciplined Xelari noble, stood across from Elias, her silver eyes locked onto him with a mixture of frustration and intrigue. She had never faced an opponent like this. He was reckless, unpredictable, and somehow still standing. The final trial was about to begin. The endurance test. This was where the Xelari always dominated. The rules of endurance. The endurance trial was simple. Both competitors would be placed in extreme conditions: heat, cold, pressure, and exhaustion. The first to give up loses. The Xelari had never lost this trial. Their bodies were built for endurance, their minds trained for resilience. Humans, however, they weren't built for this, or so the galaxy believed. Elias simply cracked his neck and smiled. "Let's get started." Valeth frowned. "You are underestimating this challenge." Elias smirked. "And you're underestimating me." The judge raised his hand. "Begin." The heat trial. The first stage took place in a sealed chamber where the temperature slowly increased. 50 degrees Celsius, 60 degrees Celsius, 70 degrees Celsius. Valeth stood tall, barely sweating. The Xelari homeworld had deserts with temperatures twice as high. Elias, meanwhile, took off his jacket and whistled. "Reminds me of summer back on Earth." The crowd chuckled. Valeth narrowed her eyes. "You should be struggling." Elias shrugged. "You ever hear of Death Valley? We got places like this back home. Hot sand, no water, but people still live there." The heat rose higher. 80 degrees Celsius. Xelari warriors were trained for this, but humans were used to suffering. Elias leaned against the wall, wiping some sweat off his forehead. "You know, the worst part isn't the heat." Valeth raised an eyebrow. "Then what is?" Elias grinned, not having a cold drink. The judge's voice echoed through the chamber, proceeding to the next stage. The cold trial. The temperature dropped instantly, from scorching heat to a freezing -50 degrees Celsius. Valeth's breath turned into mist. Even she shivered slightly, but her body was trained to endure extreme cold. "Elias." He laughed. "Now this is easy." Valeth blinked. "What?" Elias grinned. "I grew up in a place where we had to dig our cars out of ice in the morning. You know what humans do in the cold. We build snowmen. We go skiing. We have snowball fights." Valeth stared at him. He should have been suffering. Instead, he looked comfortable. The temperature dropped even lower, -70 degrees Celsius. Elias crossed his arms, rocking on his heels. "You ever hear about Siberia? Antarctica? We built research stations in places colder than this. Some guy even ran a marathon in the South Pole for fun." Valeth clenched her jaw. "Your species is insane." Elias grinned. "Yep." The pressure trial. The final stage tested the body's ability to withstand intense gravity. The room's gravity slowly increased. 1.5x normal gravity, 2x normal gravity, 3x normal gravity. Valeth stood tall, but her breathing grew heavier. The Xilari had evolved in high gravity, but even they had limits. Elias, he groaned and cracked his back. Ugh, feels like leg day at the gym. The crowd murmured in shock. Valeth's eyes widened. How are you still standing? Elias grinned through the strain. Oh, you know, years of carrying groceries in one trip, climbing stairs when the elevator is broken, wearing heavy backpacks to school. The gravity increased. 4x. Valeth finally dropped to one knee, breathing heavily. Elias, sweating but still grinning, stayed on his feet. He took a deep breath and smirked. You still think no human could satisfy this challenge? Valeth looked up at him, eyes burning with frustration. And something else. Respect. Finally, the judge raised his hand. Winner, Elias Vance. Aftermath. The arena erupted in cheers. Humans had done it. Elias had done it. Valeth slowly stood up, looking at him with newfound curiosity. You were not supposed to win. Elias wiped some sweat from his forehead. Yeah, well, humans have a habit of proving people wrong. She took a step closer. For the first time, she smiled. I underestimated you. Elias chuckled. Glad you figured that out before we got to the next round. She raised an eyebrow. There is no next round. Elias smirked. Exactly. The summit would never forget this day. And neither would Valeth Shira. The Celestial Concord Summit had never seen such an outcome. A human, Elias Vance, had defeated a Xilari noble in all 3 trials. The audience, once laughing at the idea of a human competing, was now on their feet, cheering. Elias stood in the center of the arena, catching his breath. His body ached from the trials, but the look on Valeth Shira's face made it all worth it. She was staring at him, no longer with arrogance, but with something else. Respect. The judge finally spoke. For the first time in the history of the summit, a human has emerged victorious against the Xilari elite. Elias Vance, you have proven your species beyond doubt. The crowd roared. Valeth exhaled and stepped forward. You continue to surprise me, Elias. Elias smirked. Yeah, I get that a lot. She shook her head. I thought humans were weak. I thought you were impulsive, reckless, and untrained. But you are something different. Elias grinned. Took you long enough to notice. The Xilari noble tilted her head. Tell me, human, how did you do it? How did you, a species with no special abilities, defeat me? Elias stretched his arms, thinking for a moment. Simple. Humans don't need to be the strongest. We don't need to be the fastest. We don't need to be the smartest. We just need to be one thing. Adaptable. Valeth's eyes narrowed. Adaptable. Elias nodded. You trained for these challenges your whole life. You followed the best strategies. You had experience. But I had something else. I figured out how to use what I had in a way you didn't expect. That's what humans do best. Valeth was silent for a moment, then laughed softly. The sound surprised Elias. He had never heard a Xilari noble laugh before. I underestimated you, Elias Vance. She extended a hand. But no more. Elias grinned and shook her hand. The crowd erupted in applause at the sight of a human and a Xilari noble standing side by side. An unexpected invitation. After the trials, Elias was led to a private chamber, a place reserved for honored warriors. He had barely sat down when the door slid open. Valeth stepped in. Elias raised an eyebrow. Didn't get enough of losing today. She smirked. You are insufferable. Elias leaned back. And yet here you are. Valeth sighed and took a seat across from him. Tell me, Elias, do all humans have your unpredictability? Elias chuckled. We call it thinking outside the box. She frowned. Box. Elias waved his hand. Figure of speech. It means we don't follow the rules if the rules don't work. Valeth studied him. That explains much. For a moment, there was silence. Then she spoke again, her voice thoughtful. My people believe in strength, in discipline. We look down on those we see as weak. I thought humans were weak. She exhaled. But after today, I see that strength is not always what we think it is. Elias smiled. So what now? You gonna tell all your auxiliary friends that humans aren't so bad? Valeth leaned forward. I will do more than that. Elias blinked. Oh. Valeth nodded. Elias Vance, I invite you to train with the auxiliary elite, to learn as we learn, to become more than what you are. Elias was silent for a moment. He hadn't expected this. An invitation from auxiliary noble. He grinned. Let me guess, you want to see if humans can handle auxiliary training. Valeth smirked. No, I want to see if you can. Elias chuckled. You just don't want to lose to a human ever again, do you? Valeth's eyes sparkled. Perhaps. Elias leaned back, thinking. The idea of training with the auxiliary was insane. But then again, humans never back down from a challenge. Elias Vance had done the impossible. He had beaten auxiliary noble in all 3 trials. And now, instead of holding a grudge, Valeth Shira had invited him to train with the auxiliary elite. Elias didn't know whether to laugh or be nervous. The auxiliary were the most disciplined warriors in the galaxy. Their training was known to be brutal, pushing even their own kind to the limit. And now, Elias, a human, was about to step into their world. A new battlefield. The auxiliary training grounds were unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Massive stone pillars stretched into the sky, carved with ancient symbols of victory. Warriors sparred in the open, their movements precise, fast, deadly. The air was thick with the sound of weapons clashing, grunts of effort, and instructors barking orders. Elias whistled. Fancy place you got here. Valeth, walking beside him, smirked. This is where the greatest warriors in the galaxy are made. Elias grinned. And now, they're letting a human in. Bet that's gonna be a fun story for your history books. Valeth led him toward a group of auxiliary trainees, each one tall, strong, and radiating confidence. They turned to stare at him, some with amusement, others with curiosity. One stepped forward, a towering auxiliary with dark blue skin and a scar across his jaw. This is the human. His voice was deep, skeptical. Valeth nodded. Elias Vance. He defeated me at the summit. A few warriors laughed. You lost to this, the scarred auxiliary said, looking Elias up and down. He looks soft. Elias smirked. And you look like you practice that scowl in the mirror every morning. The warriors stared. Then, to Elias's surprise, a few chuckled. The scared warrior's eyes narrowed. If you are to train with us, you must earn it. Valeth crossed her arms. I assume you want to test him. Zarek? The warrior, Zarek, nodded. A duel. No weapons, just skill. Elias sighed. Man, I just got here, and you guys already want to punch me. He rolled his shoulders. All right, let's go. The first test. A circle formed around them. Zarek cracked his knuckles. Elias stretched his arms. Valeth spoke. First to yield loses. Elias grinned. I'll try not to break anything. Zarek didn't wait. He lunged. Elias barely dodged as the auxiliary's fist came crashing down like a hammer. The ground beneath it cracked. Oh, you hit like a truck. Elias muttered, stepping back. Zarek came again, faster this time. A kick, a punch, another swing. Elias wasn't as strong. He wasn't as fast. But he was human, and humans knew how to improvise. Elias ducked, sidestepped, And just as Xeric overextended, he grabbed the Xilari's arm and used his own momentum against him. Xeric stumbled forward. The other warriors gasped. Elias smirked. "Careful, big guy, you almost fell there." Xeric growled and came at him again. This time, Elias didn't just dodge, he countered. A quick movement, a shift of balance, and Xeric found himself flat on his back. The circle went silent. Elias wiped his hands. "So, am I in?" Xeric stared at him, stunned. Then, to Elias's surprise, he laughed. "You are, interesting, human." Xeric stood and clapped Elias on the shoulder, hard enough to almost make him fall. "I like you." Valeth smiled slightly. "I had a feeling you would." The other warriors nodded. Elias had proven himself. The real training begins. For the next few days, Elias learned just how intense Xilari training was. Speed drills that left his legs shaking. Strength training that made his muscles burn. Combat techniques that required perfect precision. But every time he struggled, he adapted. And every time he adapted, the Xilari grew more impressed. One night, after an exhausting session, Elias sat beside Valeth on a stone ledge overlooking the training grounds. She studied him. "You are different from what I expected." Elias smirked. "Good different." Valeth nodded. "I have never met a species that fights like yours. You are not the strongest, not the fastest, but you find ways to win." Elias leaned back. "That's what humans do." She was silent for a moment, then said, "Perhaps the galaxy has underestimated your kind." Elias grinned. "You're just figuring that out now." Valeth shook her head. "You are insufferable." Elias laughed. "You Xilari sure love that word." As the stars shone above them, Elias realized something. This wasn't just about proving himself anymore. He was making history. Elias Vance had done what no human had ever done before. He had earned the respect of the Xilari elite. The warriors, once doubtful, now saw him as one of their own. Xeric, the powerful fighter who had challenged him, now trained alongside him. Valeth, once dismissive of humans, now looked at him with newfound respect. But Elias knew his true test had not yet come. He wasn't here just to impress the Xilari. He was here to prove that humanity deserved a place among the galaxy's greatest warriors. The final trial. Valeth stood before the assembled warriors. Her voice was strong, commanding. "Elias Vance has trained with us. He has fought with us. He has earned our respect." The warriors murmured in agreement. Valeth continued, "But to be truly one of us, he must face the final trial." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Oh great, another prove-yourself moment. What is it this time?" "Fighting a beast, solving an impossible puzzle." Xeric grinned. "Worse." Valeth smirked. "You must face me. One final duel." Elias groaned. "I was afraid of that." A battle of equals. They stood in the arena once more. This time, Elias wasn't just some outsider trying to prove himself. He was a warrior, standing before another warrior. Valeth's violet eyes locked onto him. No holding back. Elias smirked. "I wouldn't dream of it." The moment the signal was given, Valeth moved like lightning. Elias barely dodged as her strike whizzed past his head. She was faster, sharper, more precise than before. She wasn't underestimating him anymore. Good. Elias ducked under a spinning kick, using his smaller frame to his advantage. He wasn't as fast, but he was unpredictable. He shifted, rolling under her next strike, and countered with a swift punch. Valeth blocked it with ease. Then she swept his legs out from under him. Elias hit the ground. He barely had time to react before she was on him. But he twisted, using her own movement to flip her over. She landed on her feet. Clever. Elias grinned. "I try." They clashed again, blow after blow, strike after strike. It was a dance of skill and adaptation. Each time Valeth pressed the attack, Elias found a way to counter. Each time Elias tried to surprise her, she adjusted. For the first time, they were equals. Victory without defeat. Minutes passed. Neither had won. Neither had lost. Finally, Valeth stepped back, breathing heavily. She smiled. Enough. Elias wiped sweat from his brow. You giving up? Valeth shook her head. No. I am acknowledging something important. She turned to the watching warriors. Elias Vance has proven himself, not because he is stronger, nor because he is faster, but because he is something greater. She looked at Elias. You are adaptable. You do not fight like us, yet you can match us. You do not think like us, yet you can stand beside us. That is why you belong here. Derek grinned. The human is truly one of us now. The warriors stomped their feet in approval. Elias chuckled. So does this mean I get a cool auxiliary warrior title? Valeth smirked. No. But it does mean I no longer doubt your kind. Elias grinned. I'll take that. A new future. That night, Elias stood with Valeth on the cliffs overlooking the training grounds. She crossed her arms. So, what now? Elias looked up at the stars. I don't know, but I do know one thing. This is just the beginning. Valeth nodded. The galaxy has seen humans as weak for too long. Perhaps now, that will change. Elias smirked. Oh, it will. Trust me. As the stars shined above them, a new chapter in galactic history had begun. Humanity was no longer an afterthought. They were warriors. They were contenders. And they were just getting started. The end.